Hi, I'm Neil Stender, and this is my review of the 2025 Genesis G80. I've had it for about a week now, been driving it all over New England, and I have to say I love the car. It's got the top-of-the-line twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6, making 375 horsepower and 391 pound-feet of torque. It's all-wheel drive. It also comes with rear-wheel steering, so the rear wheels will actually turn out of phase at low speed to help in parking lot maneuvers and in phase on the highway for stability. I have to say that driving it with the four-wheel steering, I wouldn't know it unless somebody told me that it had it. In fact, I was just driving it this morning and my brother was looking at it from the outside and could see the rear wheels moving, which is pretty interesting because it's imperceptible from the driver's seat. So really interesting feature. They've done an excellent job of putting it in there. And I have to also say that in a parking lot, turning around, it's a pretty big car. As you can kind of see, it's a 5 Series competitor. It's a full-size sedan. Really easy to maneuver in a parking lot, which is, for me, pretty handy with my kids, dropping them off at practice. Really nice for that. And on the highway, tracks true. It's easy to drive. Seems like an excellent feature. I think they've done a good job. It's a rocket. It's a rocket from a stop sign or from a stoplight, getting onto the highway. Ton of pickup, kind of feels like a locomotive. The torque is available as low as 1,300 RPM. And when you really get into it, getting on a highway, it's almost scary fast how fast it gets going, but the seats actually have bolsters, active bolsters, and when you're getting onto it, pretty hard, the bolsters tighten up, which is kind of a nice feature. I think one of the most interesting things about this car is the presence that it has on the road. I've been driving it around and I see people stopping and looking at it, whether they're driving or walking. I've had people come up to me, they're not sure what it is. And I think as you can see that the front end of this thing is imposing. Genesis calls this their crest grille. It's finished in kind of a chrome black. The finish of the car itself is Tasman blue. It's got a metallic blue finish that, with the sun shining up close, it's spectacular. It looks like blue in some light, green in other lights. They're two-line, they call these their two-line headlights. They feature a multi-lens array LED technology. These are not adaptive headlights, but they do have automatic high beams, and I was using it just this morning on a dark back road. They're pretty good. Occasionally, I would like it to react a little bit faster. For me, I'm a little quick on the draw, so I'm not blinding other drivers, but it's a handy feature. As you can see, kind of all over the front of this car, you've got sensors everywhere, including this big array here, sensors here, including up here in the kind of behind the mirror. I don't know exactly how many sensors it has, but I will tell you that the car can get a little excited with the beeping and the vibrating, but you have the option to turn it off, as needed in the settings menu. The camera up here is part of the electronically controlled suspension with road preview, which is a pretty high-end feature that you only typically see in a Mercedes. That camera is actually reading the road as you're going and putting that data back into the suspension to adjust it before you hit it. It's got comfort setting, sport plus, and then individual. In comfort, I find it a little bit floaty. The suspension is a little bit too soft for my liking. Sport is really kind of a happy medium. Again, like the rear wheel steering, I wouldn't know that it has this road preview feature. There's nothing obvious about it, and so you read about it and find out that in fact it's on par with the Mercedes with their technology. Something else worth pointing out about this car are the wheels. These are 20-inch wheels. This is the Sport Prestige model. So it comes with 20-inch wheels that Genesis says are inspired by the look of an airplane propeller, which is pretty interesting. It's got a really fascinating texture, kind of a geometric pattern on the alloys, which again, I've had people come up and ask me about it just for the wheels. So I would say well done to Genesis for these really kind of interesting design features. Another thing that's interesting about this car is they have staggered width rubber. So the front wheels are narrower than the back wheels. It's got upgraded brakes as part of the sport package. These are 14.2-inch front rotors, which is pretty big. This is their top-of-the-line car. It stickers at $77,000. It's got all the bells and whistles. And part of that sport package are these wheels that are staggered front to back. So with that wider contact patch in the back, although the car is all-wheel drive, it's a rear-wheel drive platform. And so having that fatter contact patch in the back, plus the electronically controlled limited slip diff that this car has, gives it very lively handling. It's exciting, in the curves. It's really fun to drive. This is not an M5, but it's a blast to drive. It feels buttoned down. It feels planted. You never feel like you're out of control. That rear wheel kind of bias, that platform, it just helps with the turn-in. You're never feeling that kind of push of understeer. It feels like you're really articulating around the curves. I will say, something about the brakes is that in the comfort mode, they're a little bit grabby. And I don't know if this is a brand new car. It's only got 1,500 miles on it, so it's possible the brakes aren't fully bedded yet. But interestingly, changing the setting on the brakes to sport, they feel a little more responsive. So just an interesting kind of tidbit for driving the car. You might not be able to see it, but there's a tiny little camera right here. And when you put on the turn signal while you're driving, it'll give you a live feed of the side of the car. For me at first, I would have kind of put that in the gimmick category, but I have to say I've been using it and I find myself glancing down into the instrument cluster, which is really just a huge digital screen, and it's kind of handy. I actually kind of like it. This blind spot view monitor is on all the time, although you can turn it off. And so anytime I use the turn signals, I'm getting a live feed right next to me, which is interesting and a little bit handy for when you're, kind of trying to see where you're going. Because I will, another thing kind of worth pointing out is that sitting in it, it's got thick pillars, and it can be a little difficult to see in the blind spots. So I tend to lean towards not loving all the crazy technology, but I think they've done a good job with it. So right here, there's a small screen or a display as part of the head-up display, and it projects information. You can't see it unless you're sitting directly behind the wheel, and right in front of you in really crisp white graphics, you've got your speed, and part of the traffic sign recognition technology, it's showing you just a tiny little speed limit sign so you know what the speed limit is of the road that you're driving. It's really handy. If you've got navigation running, it's showing you those directions directly in front of you. If a call comes through, it'll say who's calling. The head-up display feature on this Genesis G80 is tremendous. So Genesis has been making rear-wheel drive sedans. Their G70, their G80, and their G90. You can really see it in that kind of the long hood proportions and the kind of the raked back. It's killer. The car is gorgeous. Something that at a glance is nice to look at is how raked this windshield is, and you can really see it from the profile. However, sitting in the car, I can tell you that it does impact headroom a little bit. Fortunately, the seats have enough adjustability that you can make yourself comfortable, but at 6 feet tall, when I got in it at first with a hat on and a panoramic sunroof, I felt a little cramped. So anybody in the kind of that 6'4", 6'5" range, make sure you get the seat right before you make any final decisions. So something else that I think is worth pointing out with this Genesis is that, in the world of luxury sedans, really BMW is kind of the standard bearer and has been for a long time. This Genesis, which is competing directly with them and undercuts them on price, of course, it looks like nothing else on the road. The BMW 5 Series, when you see one, I love cars, so when I see it, I know what it is. I don't know that most people would, the average car buyer would look at it and say that's something interesting or something exciting. You can't not look at this G80 and wonder what it is. It's just a fabulous car. The lines on it are tremendous. It's got that, classic rear-wheel drive, long hood, short trunk lid styling. And, and these little touches, like the imposing crest grille, this two-line headlamp design, airplane-inspired wheel design. I mean, this is pretty common at this point, the integrated fender turn signals, but Genesis has two of them, and they kind of flow, right in with this two-line headlamp array into the fender piece. It's got lights on here, it runs back. They flow it into this integrated spoiler, just kind of kicking up off the back. You can see, again, the tail lamps carry through from the headlamp design. Looking at it up close, it's really fascinating how you've got this sort of concave shape here kicked in, but then running around the other sides of it, it's convex. It's this kind of just interesting geometric design that they've put together, and I think it looks great. And the exhaust pipes, which have real exhaust pipes behind them, behind the finishers, mirror the crest grille in the front. So I would argue that whoever's responsible for the design of Genesis is killing it, and their cars are just so much more interesting than the usual stuff. Sitting here inside the 2025 Genesis G80, I have to point out how gorgeous it is. It's got a two-tone beige and gray design. As part of the sport model, it includes what Genesis is calling a carbon fiber sort of trim, these inlays. I'm not sure I would have identified this as carbon fiber. It has a interesting geometric pattern to it, but it does look nice. Something else that's really interesting in my opinion is the way they've run this full width HVAC register system. It's almost knocked out of the dashboard, and with a couple of easy to move toggles, just looks really, really nice. Certainly the centerpiece of this car for anybody looking at it is this 27-inch OLED screen. It's fabulous. The graphics are super crisp. The response is tremendous. You can use it as a touchscreen. Also built into the center console is this rotary dial. It's very intuitive. You can rotate it to move through the menus. You can press on it. It works much like a mouse. Anybody familiar with a modern day mouse will get it right away. Something else that's worth pointing out about this car is within this sort of center stack area, the HVAC controls, it's touchscreen enabled, but it's got haptic feedback. So it can be a little tricky when you're driving to figure out without a lot of physical buttons to remember where everything is. Fortunately, you know when you've activated it because the screen kind of moves on your finger a little bit, which is a little weird, but it's a nice sort of indication that you're in the right spot. This car has a Bang & Olufsen 18 speaker audio system. It's killer. The audio system in this car is so loud and tremendous that my daughter asked me to turn it down. I'm probably deaf. I've been listening to loud music for a long time. Motley Crue sounds killer on it. Anybody that likes music is going to be thrilled. Love the flat bottom steering wheel. Definitely adds a little bit of sport to this sport model. It's got paddle shifters, which I like a traditional stick with 3 pedals. It's interesting. It is a little fun. Chances are you're probably going to leave it in automatic mode and it works just as well. The thing about the paddle shifters that I think would take a little getting used to is knowing when you're in 2nd gear or 6th gear and not in automatic mode. So if you're playing around with them and you're not really using them the way they're intended to be, and you're in one of the sport modes like Sport Plus, it'll really hold the RPMs. I don't know the exact logic behind the shift points, but I can tell you that if you're not paying attention, the engine will rev. I'm sure eventually it will shift, but you might want to, pay attention to whether you're in automatic mode or paddle shift mode. In this car, and most cars like this, if you just hold down on the upshift button for a moment, it'll shift back into automatic mode. Nice luxurious touches about this car. There's a frameless rear view mirror, so it just eliminates that black edge. It looks luxurious. It's auto dimming, which is great at night. One of my favorite features of the car, and everybody's got a different opinion on this, I have to start the car up to talk about it, is this panoramic sunroof, which you might not be able to see right now, but it's got a power operated sunshade that opens up like a clamshell, that moves out of the way, and then the whole panel picks up and kicks out of the way and opens up the interior. It's fabulous. I love it. Some other interesting features, it's got a power operated rear sunshade. So when my kids first got in this car, because of course I'm trying to present this as an interesting vehicle for people with kids, because if I was buying a new car, I would definitely consider something like this. It's much more fun to drive, in my opinion, than an SUV. I've got 3 kids. They all fit comfortably. If my wife's in the car, it's a little bit different. There'll be some fighting over the middle seat, but for running around town, it's perfect. And when they first got in it, I was showing them some of these trick features like a power-operated rear sunshade. So I press a button, and this whole thing comes up and blocks the sun from the back. My daughters love it. My son was less interested in it, but my daughters thought it was fascinating. Some other sort of dazzling features about this car are the fact that they're heated and ventilated, the front seats, which is not that uncommon at this point in a car of this class, but the rear seats are also heated on the outboard positions, and the driver's seat, much to the chagrin of my kids sitting in the passenger seat, is massaging. So only the driver's seat. But one of the really cool features about this car is that when you're driving for a set amount of time, the default is 20 minutes, the seat will start massaging your back. It's this system intended to reduce fatigue and keep your back from getting, sore when you're driving for a long time. You can adjust the settings, even allows you to, change the type of massage. The bolsters will tighten up and move as needed. It's a really nice feature. I was really impressed with it as well. The thigh cushion here, you can adjust it and kick it out to kind of add more support here. As a family, as a dad, somebody with kids, obviously safety is top of mind for me. Cool car aside, it's super safe. It's got 10 airbags and it's loaded with all the latest advanced driver assistance systems. So, one of the key ones I think is forward collision mitigation. So that's a blend of a forward collision warning and automated emergency braking. So if the car detects that you're about to have a collision, it'll drill the brakes for you. I will say that it's a little touchy. You can adjust the sensitivity of it. I did have it kind of grab the brakes on me unexpectedly when I was pulling out of a parking spot. But frankly, if I've got kids in the car, I'd rather the car be overdoing it than underdoing it. So that's a nice feature. The blind spot monitoring is a common feature these days, but this car Has a blind spot view monitor, so you can actually see a live feed of the blind spots in the gauge cluster. When you're driving the car, driving down the road, it has adaptive cruise control, which is pretty common on a lot of modern cars these days. So adaptive cruise control, if you don't know what it is, you turn it on and it will adapt the speed of the car based on traffic. So if you set it, you can set the distance, how far you want to be with the car in front of you, set your speed, and then the car will adjust as needed to keep you moving with the flow of traffic without you having to control it. However, one of the more cutting edge features on this Genesis is what the company calls highway driving assist. They have highway driving assist 1 and 2, 2 being the most advanced. In this car, with that system, it'll keep you in the lane, so it'll keep you centered in the lane. And one of the really interesting features is when you're on the highway, if you want to change lanes with highway driving assist activated, if you click the turn signal, it'll change lanes for you. I think it'll be an interesting feature to test out. Genesis is, right at the leading edge of this technology. They consistently are fitting, in my opinion, some of the highest level tech, and this car is certainly loaded with it. On that note, from behind the wheel, when driving, the car feels super planted. The turn-in is crisp. It's not a super sharp handling car, but it's not supposed to be. It's a luxury sport touring car. So it's got enough acceleration to get you excited. It will surprise people at a stoplight. Turbo lag is right there if you're kind of idling along and you step on it, just a second for it to kick in, but it gets up and goes. It's an unbelievable car. I'm blown away. I can't say I'm personally in the market for this segment, but if I were, I would definitely be taking a hard look at this Genesis G80. It screams of a company that is really trying to impress with every little detail. It's got a suede headliner. It's got ventilation built into the A-pillars. All this LED lighting up here, back in the back, the headroom in the front, you can adjust it easily. You can't adjust the headroom in the back. However, the headliner is scooped out, so taller folks in the back seat should be a little more comfortable. I've sat back there, it's 6 feet tall, plenty of leg room. Another nice feature in the back is that, for me, the kids can control their temperature back there. So it's got automatic climate control for the rear seat, along with the seat heating. They were very fascinated by the pass-through, so they can goof around with that. Be great if you were going skiing. Something I really like about this car as it comes to day-to-day driving is that with all that technology built into it with these advanced driver assistance systems, something that's really nice is this sort of parking camera. They call it surround view monitor. And if you've ever been parking and you're a little nervous about the curb, which I would be with these 20-inch rims, you can pull up a bird's eye view and a full sort of three-dimensional exterior view. And at low speed, it's really nice for knowing exactly where those, curbs are, or where another car is, or if there's somebody or, something behind your car. It's really handy. You can move through the camera views, which I love. The infotainment system on this 2025 G80 is unbelievable. You can adjust nearly anything. One of the interesting ones is the ambient lighting of all things. It's got about a dozen different preset colors, or you can go through and adjust the colors using kind of like a Pantone fan of colors. It's kind of like a subdued light piping system. I love it. Overall, this 2025 Genesis G80 is a car I would buy in a second. If you're looking at the Genesis line, be aware that they also have the G70, the smaller, more of a BMW 3 Series competitor. They also have the G90 for somebody that's looking for a larger sedan. And of course, the ever popular SUV, Genesis makes a whole line of them. So there's the GV70, which is kind of on par with this, and then the GV80 is their biggest SUV at the moment. I have driven the GV80 Coupe, which is their top of the line, luxury lined SUV. It's unbelievable. I personally prefer sedans, but I can tell you from now having been behind the wheel of two of these Genesis cars, SUVs, they're knocking it out of the park. Overall, this 2025 Genesis G80 is a tremendous car. I'd recommend it to anybody. I've had a blast driving it. Nothing but good things to say about it. Thanks so much for watching this review. Please be sure to click the subscribe button below, and we'll catch you next time.